get on the train or get off the tracks. That is a leadership colloquialism I have heard countless times over the last 15 years, usually expressed in the context of a major organizational change. The underlying meaning is probably obvious. The organization has decided where it is going. You can choose to get on board and move in that direction, or eventually you may be asked to go in a different one. It is not exactly the most inspiring approach to leading organizational change. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder how much of our traditional approach to organizational change has been built around some version of that idea. There is another version of it that comes from a famous story about the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés. In 1519, Cortés and roughly 500 men sailed from Cuba and landed on the coast of what is present-day Mexico. As the story is often told, Cortés ordered his men to disable, dismantle, or scuttle the boats they had arrived on, eliminating any possibility of retreat. Hence the phrase we still use today, burn the boats. For years, I have heard burn the boats used as an inspiring metaphor for commitment. Once you have decided where you are going, eliminate the possibility of retreat and go all in. But as I was thinking about that metaphor this week, something about it struck me differently. Cortés didn't actually create commitment among his men. He removed their ability to act on their lack of commitment. There is a subtle difference there. In some ways, burn the boats and get on the train or get off the tracks represent a similar philosophy of leading change. The direction and strategy has been determined. Your job is to get on board. Maybe that approach worked reasonably well for a certain era of organizational change. In fact, I suspect many of today's senior leaders grew up inside organizations where change largely worked this way. Decisions were made at the top, communicated down through the organization, and leaders were responsible for getting everyone else on board. Some of the remnants of that approach are probably still with us in many enterprise organizations today. This week I read a McKinsey article titled From Adoption to Impact: 3 Horizons of AI Transformation. I have linked the full article below, and if you are responsible for leading AI transformation or helping an organization navigate it, I think it is worth reading. But before we go any further, let me take a minute to introduce myself if you are new here. My name is Chris Schmelzer, and I serve leaders who recognize the need and understand that the old models of leading and working are no longer keeping up with the pace of change. Every week, I track the subtle signals that a massive reset is coming for what we refer to as white-collar work, and share thoughts on how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change. If you find any value in this video, like it, share your comments below, and subscribe. McKinsey surveyed 750 employees and leaders to better understand how organizations are progressing in their AI transformation efforts. One of the findings that stood out to me was that 70% of respondents said they personally felt prepared to adopt and use AI, while only 27% of leaders believed their organizations were ready to make the broader shifts necessary to fully capture its value. In other words, which I sense is right, people are actually moving faster than the organizations around them. And that is an important acknowledgement. McKinsey's research suggests the larger opportunity isn't simply getting more individuals to use AI. It is redesigning the organization around what the technology now makes possible. Their research describes 3 horizons. Enablement, where individuals begin using AI in their existing work automation, where organizations begin redesigning and automating workflows. Reinvention, where roles, workflows, operating models, and the way work gets done begin to fundamentally change. However, only 11% of the leaders surveyed said their organizations had reached that 3rd horizon, reinvention. That does not surprise me, because there is an enormous difference between asking someone to use a new tool and asking someone to help reinvent the way they work. And I think that distinction may expose a limitation in some of the ways we have historically thought about leading change. A common tool in traditional change management is something called stakeholder mapping. There are different versions of it, but one of the simplest is an X and Y axis. On one axis, you might measure an individual's level of support for a change, from low to high. On the other, their level of influence inside the organization, again from low to high. You then plot the stakeholders impacted by the change across the four quadrants. Ideally, the people in the upper right quadrant are your champions. They have high influence and high support. Part of the work of change management becomes understanding everyone who isn't in that quadrant and determining what combination of communication, training, engagement, or support might help move them closer to it. I have used versions of this exercise countless times, but lately, as I have been working with leadership teams navigating AI transformation, I have started wondering whether we need a different set of axes. The first axis I have been thinking about is knowing. By knowing, I mean the degree to which someone actually understands AI. Not simply whether they have opened ChatGPT or know how to write a prompt, but whether they have begun to understand what the technology can do, how quickly it is evolving, and how it will fundamentally change their work. People are all over that spectrum. Some have spent hundreds of hours experimenting with these tools and thinking deeply about their implications. Others have barely touched them. Most are probably somewhere in the middle. The second axis is willing. By willing, I mean the degree to which someone is genuinely open to using AI to change the way they work, potentially in significant ways. People are all over that spectrum too. And when you put those two dimensions together, something interesting happens. Someone can be highly willing without being highly knowing. They may be excited about AI, using it constantly, and eager to experiment without yet recognizing how significantly it could reshape their role and the entire organization. Someone else can be highly knowing and have very little willingness. In fact, their unwillingness may be partly a result of how much they understand. They can see where the technology is heading and are genuinely concerned about what that might mean for their expertise, identity, status, even employment. Someone can be low in both. And then there are the people in the upper right quadrant. They understand what is happening, at least as much as any of us can right now. And they are willing to participate in what comes next. Knowing and willing. The more I thought about those two words this week, the more I started wondering if that is actually what organizations should be trying to create. Because you can force someone, through fear, onto the train. You can eliminate their other options by burning the boats. You can mandate the use of a specific AI tools. You can set lofty adoption targets. You can measure and reward usage. And all of those things might increase adoption. But none of them necessarily increase willingness. That distinction becomes even more important if McKinsey is right that the real economic value of AI will come not simply from individuals using the tools, but from organizations fundamentally reimagining how work gets done. That is where the rubber meets the road. If you are asking someone to use AI to summarize their meeting notes, compliance might be enough. If you are asking them to help rethink their role, redesign the workflows they have spent years mastering, change how decisions are made, or perhaps participate in creating an organization that eventually requires fewer people to perform certain kinds of work, you are asking something very different of them. You are asking them to knowingly and willingly participate in changing their own work, and ultimately their own identity with the work. That requires something different from leadership. McKinsey's research points toward trust as one of the critical ingredients. Across all three horizons of AI transformation, trust in the organization was an important factor in readiness. Respondents who reported low trust in their organization's support during AI transformation were also 1.5 times more likely to report anxiety about AI-related changes at work. What I appreciated about the research was that McKinsey did not suggest the answer was simply making people less anxious. In fact, they make an important distinction between reducing anxiety and building trust. Those aren't the same thing. There are legitimate reasons for people to feel uncertain about what AI might mean for their work. Leaders cannot honestly promise that jobs won't change or that organizations will look the same 5 years from now, let alone 24 months from now. Trying to reassure people of something we cannot possibly know might temporarily reduce anxiety, but it probably doesn't create much trust. I think the hard work is intentionally creating the conditions that allow people to be regulated enough to see through the fear and uncertainty more clearly, even while some of it remains. That feels like a thin needle to thread. But it brings me back to the knowing and willing matrix. If someone has low knowing, the leadership opportunity may be to help them understand. Give them opportunities to experiment, build their fluency, talk openly and honestly about what the technology can and cannot do. Help them make sense of what is happening around them. If someone has high knowing but low willing, more training, exposure, or tokens probably isn't the answer. Instead, it might be slowing down to become more curious and first ask a simple question. Why? What are they seeing that you aren't? What are they afraid of losing? What assumptions are they making about what this transformation means for them? What have they experienced in previous organizational transformations that might be shaping the way they are responding to this one? Those are very different conversations. And they require not only a different kind of awareness from leaders, but also a degree of patience. For decades, organizations have gotten relatively good at managing people through change. We have communication plans, training plans, stakeholder maps, adoption metrics, change champion networks, and countless other tools designed to help move an organization from its current state to some desired future state. I don't think those things suddenly become irrelevant, but I am increasingly wondering whether this particular era of transformation is asking something more of us. The challenge in this all is the destination itself isn't particularly clear, and I think it is changing regularly. Much of traditional change management was built around helping people move from a known current state toward a reasonably well-defined future state. But what happens when the future state keeps moving? As the technology continues to change, the work continues to change. The roles and responsibilities will also continue to change. And the people being asked to make that journey aren't simply passengers on the train. If organizations are going to reach the kind of reinvention McKinsey describes, those people will have to play a role in building the tracks the train is moving on. That requires more than governance, compliance, communication, and training. It requires people who increasingly understand what is happening around them and who have enough trust, agency, and openness to participate in shaping what comes next. People who are knowingly and willingly part of the transformation. I think that is the shift leaders need to begin thinking about. For hundreds of years, burn the boats has endured as a metaphor for commitment. But the more I reflect, the less convinced I am that commitment is what Cortez actually created. He simply removed the alternative. That might get people moving in the same direction. However, I'm not sure it will get them where organizations need to go next. If you want to explore how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change, my new book, The Missing Link, offers a new lens. It shows why most change efforts stall and how human capacity, not just strategy, determines success. Once you see it, you'll lead change very differently. You can access it for free right now. Link is below the video.